I'll talk about how liberal morality is built mostly on one of these psychological foundations, that is, issues of care and harm. Third, I'll show that to relieve the suffering of victims, who are the core sacralized object in the liberal moral order, in the pursuit of that, liberals violate the other 5 foundations and commit 5 kinds of sacrilege. If you violate sacred values, you are committing sacrilege for anyone who holds those values. And last, I will end by praising constrained parochialism, which sounds like a very conservative concept, and is, but I'll argue that it is perhaps the best way to advance the C-care agenda and many of the liberal values of increasing care and altruism. Okay, here we go. Here's part 1. Many animals are social. Sociality is a very good feature for animals to reap all kinds of benefits from group living. So sociality is very, very common, but only a few animals on Earth, or a few species on Earth, are what we could call ultra-social, way beyond social. They live together in groups of hundreds, thousands, even millions in some cases, massive division of labor, even a willingness to die for the group. The Hymenoptera were the first creatures on Earth who discovered this evolutionary trick, and they did it by concentrating breeding in a queen so that they're all sisters, or brothers and sisters. So that's the Hymenoptera, and then some other animals discovered it totally independently. Some cockroaches figured out this trick of having a queen, and they changed body type, and we now know them as termites. Also naked mole rats. In recent years, it's been discovered that there's some shrimp and aphids. Ultrasociality turns out to have been to have evolved 10, 20, 30 times in the history of life. But in all cases, everybody is a very close relative, typically a first-degree sibling. There's only one species on Earth that can do this without being kin. These people are all working together, dividing labor, in some cases volunteering to kill themselves for the cause, in some cases volunteering just to gross out the rest of us. None of these people are, well, some of them may be sisters and brothers, but basically all of this gets done without kinship. How? How can there be a creature on Earth that is so good at ultra-sociality without any need for kinship? How can that be? Well, the answer is that we have this special trick, you see. We evolved this incredible trick, unlike anything else in the history of life, of being able to circle around sacred objects, and when we circle around sacred objects together, we then trust each other and can function together as a team. So these are Muslims bowing down at Mecca. You don't have to physically move in a circle. The Pope obviously is His Holiness, the Pope. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. As long as people share ideas about what is holy, what is sacred, what is untouchable, then they will be bound together into a community that can work together and achieve some degree of ultra-sociality. This ability is absolutely crucial for war. We wouldn't have war without this. Well, we wouldn't have civilization, but we wouldn't have war, and we wouldn't have politics. War, politics, religion, all of these things are manifestations of this incredible ability we have to bind ourselves together with large groups that are not blood relatives and often risk our lives or give our lives. So the psychology of sacredness requires that something be elevated, we circle around it either metaphorically or physically, and then once something is sacralized, no jokes, no trade-offs, you have an irrational commitment to it and to protecting it. And everybody shares that commitment, and that makes them a group. So when you circle around something, it's as though, I hesitate to say this because I'm sure there's some engineers in the audience or physicists, but as I understand it, when you move metal particle or metal lines through an electric field, it generates a current. In the same way, when people circle around a sacred object, it's as though it creates an electric field that makes everybody line up. And you see this certainly in academic disciplines, I've argued. People line up along the invisible lines of flux, and those are the sorts of opinions that are permitted, and others that violate that are not permitted and are not expressed. So that's all I'll say about the first point, that morality is about binding groups together around sacred objects or principles. This is not generally the way you approach morality, probably. You probably think it has something to do with not hurting people, with being fair, with keeping promises. But I'm telling you from an evolutionary point of view, this, I think, is a better way to understand this incredible ability of our species about group binding. All right, part 2. Liberal morality is built mostly on one foundation. That, at least, is my assertion. I'll show you some evidence for that. In graduate school, I had two sort of epiphanies while I was reading about morality. One was that evolutionary psychology was true, at least that we are products of evolution. Another is that cultural psychology is true. That is, that we live in matrices that are constructed before we ever got here, and we live on these threads, and that you have to look both at our evolutionary history and at our cultural development to understand anything interesting about us. And what I've tried to do is to say, okay, what are the psychological foundations that evolution has put in our minds, modules, if you will, in a certain way? What are these psychological foundations, and how do they develop within a cultural context to give us the vast variety of moral matrices and moral worlds that we find? And so from a review of the anthropological and evolutionary literature, my colleagues and I came to the conclusion that there are 6 best candidates. The first one is care and harm. We're all mammals here, right? Everyone in this room is a mammal. Well, if you're a mammal, that means you are the product of a long history of evolution for caring for children. Your bodies are designed for it. Your hormones, oxytocin, have been pulled into new services to change our behavior. We are all mammals. We are all designed to care and protect. Now, everybody has this. Everybody cares about suffering, cruelty, violence, harm. But is it equally distributed across the political spectrum? Here's a car I photographed on my way to work in Charlottesville. You can see the bumper stickers say, "Stop the genocide, save Darfur, humane eating, and save Darfur." Any guesses? Liberal or conservative? It's pretty obvious because this person has a one foundation decorating scheme. This person chose exclusively stickers about stopping cruelty to innocent victims. So we know this person must be liberal. Here's a coffee shop I was in New Paltz, New York. The signs say, "No one is free when others are oppressed," "How to end violence against women and children," and then there's an American flag where the stars are replaced by logos of corporations. Any guess? Liberal or conservative coffee shop? Well, you know it's liberal because they have a one foundation decorating scheme. Their decorations are all about protecting innocent victims. Okay? So social justice, I believe, basically means we circle around certain victim groups and then we demonize the powerful. Corporations, it can be the government in some cases, but in general the government is then what's necessary to protect those innocent victims, at least in the current American situation. A little quantitative evidence. So my colleagues and I have a website called yourmorals.org, where we've had about 200,000 people come from all over the world, mostly America, and we've had about 60 surveys so far. I'm just going to show you little bits of data, but bear in mind that for each of the basic claims I'm making, we've got a lot of studies showing this in multiple ways. The way to read these graphs that I'll show you is that when people come to the website, they register, and they're asked to self-describe as, are you very liberal, slightly liberal, neutral, well, that's centrist, moderate, slightly conservative or conservative. I've collapsed the very liberal and liberal together, so I've reduced it to a 5-point scale left-right. That's what they said when they register. Then they take whatever surveys they want, and we can look at the responses by their graph by their politics. In this case, this is the Moral Foundations questionnaire has questions about all the different moral foundations. And there are 6 items in each foundation. So here's one item for the care foundation. Compassion for those who are suffering is the most crucial virtue. Do you strongly agree with it? Agree with it? Neither agree nor disagree. So people they respond to all these survey questions, and we average them together and give them a score. What you see here is just for this single item, but all the items work the same way. For this single item, scale goes from 0, actually goes to 5 is the highest possible value. Everyone, left, right, and center, cares about, everybody thinks that compassion is good on average. Liberals are more likely over here. Liberals give a higher rating to this question than conservatives. The midpoint of the scale is actually 2.5. So conservatives are just slightly, very conservative people are just slightly positive. People who say they're liberal or very liberal are substantially positive. So liberals agree with this item more than conservatives. But everybody cares about care to some extent. That's the basic finding on the Care Foundation. More data, I'll just show you very briefly. One survey we use is the Interpersonal Reactivity Index. It's a very widely used measure of people's sympathy, empathy, how they respond to the suffering in others. There are 4 subscales. The white bars show the responses from all liberals, the black bars from all conservatives, and the hatched bars in the middle from all the self-described libertarians. What you can see is that for all 4 kinds of empathy here, liberals score the highest, and libertarians this is the one that most matters right here. That is empathic concern. This is the one that's closest to the concerns of C-care. Just how much does it bother you when you see other people suffering? What we see is that liberals have the highest responses on these items, libertarians by far the lowest. Basically, what we find is that libertarians are more like liberals than they are like conservatives in their personality, except that they are pretty lacking in empathy. So liberals are the highest, libertarians the lowest, and conservatives are in between. So liberals score higher on every measure of empathy that we've ever used. And liberals often define their morality in terms of this one foundation. Here's a definition from Sam Harris, the new atheist. As I believe, morality is a system of thinking about and maximizing the well-being of conscious creatures like ourselves, then many people's moral concerns are frankly immoral. And then he says that Muslims, Jews, Christians, everybody, all those religious, they're all immoral. What's moral is a morality based on reducing suffering. And who offers that? What is the one religion that offers that? That's right. So when you look at the Dalai Lama, you look at, obviously there are many branches of Hinduism. Care and compassion is, of course, important in all of them. But the Dalai Lama, I think, puts it quite clearly when he says, we all naturally desire happiness and not to suffer. These are rights from which, in my opinion, we can infer that an ethical act is one which does not harm others' experience or expectation of happiness. If you read this book, you will find, or at least I found, that there is no gap, no daylight between the Dalai Lama and standard American politically liberal secular morality. It's as though it was written by any liberal philosopher. Well, I was about to say it's as though it was written by Sam Harris, except the emotional tone is night and day. You can do this with either love in your heart or you can do it with anger. This is with love in his heart. But the point is, in terms of the moral foundations, it's a one foundation. Morality is reducing harm and suffering. Okay? So that's all I'll say about this second point. I hope that you'll agree with me that liberal morality builds primarily on this one foundation. There are other issues. There are issues of rights in liberal theory and liberal tradition, which I'll come back to. But the core of it, I believe, is concerns about care, harm, suffering, victimization. All right, this sets us up for what I hope will be the most important part, the part that you really take away from this lecture, which is that if you have this sort of morality and you sacralize victim groups and you don't think that there's more to morality than harm, then you are pretty much guaranteed to trample on all the other moral values that other people in this country hold sacred. So here we go. The second foundation is proportionality or cheating. We used to call it fairness, but what we've now realized is that there's so many different kinds of fairness. The real core of fairness is not equality. I'll come back to equality later. The real core of fairness is proportionality or equity. Are you taking out in proportion to what you put in, or are you a free rider, a slacker trying to take without giving? Are you trying to cheat us? Are you trying to rip us off? And this psychological system guards groups against free riders, cheaters, and slackers. It's crucial for cooperation. If any of you have ever lived in a group home, a group house, lived with friends, you know that if there's one, or especially if there's two other people in the house, pretty quickly it's going to descend into accusations of whose turn it was supposed to be to do the dishes, et cetera, et cetera. Now, equality matters, of course, but equality matters primarily in the special case in which all inputs were the same. So if everybody contributed the same, then yes, everyone should get equal returns. But if not, then not. Here's another car I saw in Charlottesville. Any guesses about whether this person's liberal or conservative? Well, not just the Namaste and the Gandhi, but the idea that an eye for an eye, that is proportionality, that's reciprocity on the negative side. If somebody does something bad should be done to them. Well, that seems to endorse a kind of violence, moralistic violence, reciprocal violence. Well, that's bad because that's violence. So no, we shouldn't do an eye for an eye. That's a very bad way to run things. So this person, we can be quite confident, is politically liberal. Here's a conservative bumper sticker. Conservatives are sick and tired of liberal compassion, in part, or primarily, because it violates proportionality. It violates fairness. A liberal is one that believes in compassion with everyone else's money. take from people who, just take from others and give to the slackers and free riders. The conservative idea, this was a sign from a Tea Party rally, spread my work ethic, not my wealth. And this is not just an American thing. Here's one of the election posters for Cameron in the UK. Let's cut benefits for those who refuse to work. He's all saying, let's do it. Let's cut benefits for those who refuse to work. Yes. So this is an electoral slogan. You can rally people behind such a slogan. This is a call for fairness. But it's not equality, it's proportionality. So here's the data